Hey, welcome to Graphic Policy Television, GPTV. I'm Brett. In my hands is Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz's Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, adapted by Paul Peart-Smith. It's a graphic interpretation. I've never heard this book before. This was originally released in 2014. Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz went through basically a 400-year history about the indigenous populations, primarily in the United States, but other parts of the world as well, to create, I wouldn't say a different narrative, but a narrative of the growth of the United States from that perspective. And this is a fascinating read. This is really, really good. So I grew up in the Buffalo area. It is an area that had a lot of indigenous populations. I don't even remember all the various tribes that were there, but walking around, it's not. You'll stumble on a place named a name from the people who originally lived there. I remember in school learning about like the buildings that they built. A little bit about some of the wars that went on, but generally you didn't go into much detail. What's interesting is this starts off laying the groundwork that these were the indigenous people here, that the European settlers that showed up didn't discover shit. It was already settled, which I think is a no-duh, and that these nations were nations, that they had, towns, if you want to call them towns, roads. They had a balance between nature and, their civilization, that they traded, that they had rules and laws and government, that they were a fully functioning civilization before any European showed up. And I think what's interesting is Dunbar-Ortiz begins this by laying that out and basically kind of attacking properly the mythology that has been built about the native individuals through entertainment. That there was a concerted effort to downplay all that and rewrite history. And this, for a lot of it, basically attacks the history or the propaganda, I will call propaganda, that we've been fed in schools, and I think is just starting to be challenged. It's a fascinating read, and if you go in with open eyes and willing to connect the dots, it does, I think, a fantastic job of laying out what deep down we all know. The concept of manifest destiny is crap. It was just basically a cover of genocide and land theft. That the nation that we live on was built off of genocide, land theft, colonialism, lies, broken treaties. I already said genocide, but there was a lot of genocide. And we call it whatever, American prosperity. And it's interesting, is like it goes through what a lot of the various presidents did, good and bad. It lays out, as much as Lincoln is praised, also did horrible things. Of course, Jackson was a utter son of a bitch. But a lot of what government did, creating treaties, just grabbing land, creating laws to grab land, using others to murder. It's interesting, and I think what also it does really, really good job is laying out the justification of that, what those settlers and to this day told themselves to justify all this. Early on, it focuses not just on what was going on in the United States, but also in South America, in Africa, in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, where the white individuals, white colonial powers, France, England, all that, were othering the indigenous people there, and basically saying they're not white, they're inferior. you know, a lot of this plays off to today. We see the same, you know, rhetoric, words play today, and we see the reverberations of that to today. And I think it's really interesting to read. Like, you can, you know, I personally think this does an amazing job of connecting the dots. It's things that we know that didn't quite seem right, you know, when you learn things in school that didn't quite make sense. Like, hey, they have these giant structures and you know, towns or whatever you want to call them, and, you know, were settled. But for some reason, you know, the native population were also wandering around and hunting and all, and going, you know, in tents that were broken down. And, like, there was just things that didn't connect. You know, just the idea of saying that the nation was discovered when, you know, there were people already here shows off the disconnect. What I think is also great is there's a lot of history here I had no idea. You know, the other thing I think stands out to me, going back to learning, you know, what we learned in school, is you learned what was specific to your area. Like, we didn't learn about Jamestown. We didn't learn about things going on in Virginia or Florida or Midwest. You know, we just focused on what was going on in Western New York. But when you start putting in all these other events in these other areas, you know, a narrative begins to form, a picture begins to form, that I think is actually really interesting. And this book, I think, does that. It takes us through as 400 years, like you know, before Europe discovered the land, to modern times. But I also think, and I know a lot of people are going to downvote this, and they're gonna tune out already. But where I really appreciate this is that, you know, it gets to the end and doesn't sit there and be like, give us our land back. You know, obviously there are some people who want that, but I really want to read it because I actually think this is a great way of thinking about it. And it says, you know, this is the late Native historian Jack Forbes stressed, while living persons are not responsible for what their ancestors did, they are responsible for the society they live in, which is a product of that past. Assuming this responsibility provides a means of survival and liberation. I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, is that we are products of the past. We are not responsible for what happened before, but we benefit from that past. We live in a society that is built off that past. So what are we going to do today, and what are we going to do tomorrow to help right those wrongs? And I think that's what a lot of this kind of focuses on. It focuses on the abuses, it focuses on the reality, it focuses on the colonialism, the genocide, the murder, the rape, like all of it. The broken promises, it destroys myths that are out there. I mean, it does a great job of just breaking down all the bullshit that you learned in school. But it also sits there and says, you know, all this stuff happened. What can we do to fix it? And it gives some suggestions, but it doesn't lay out a path forward. And I kind of like that. I like that it leaves the reader and others to try to figure out where we go from there and how we resolve that. The art, I think, is fantastic. It's, you know, it's a graphic text in a lot of ways. You know, it's not dialogue back and forth, but it's facts, and it's really interesting facts. It's a very interesting history, and it's like hauntingly beautiful, I think, is a great way of describing the art. But yeah, I mean, it's I think a really interesting history, and a great read, and very educational, and something that's well worth checking out. You can go get this. It's out in shops now. We got a link beneath this video. Put in your zip code. It'll tell the shops near you. No shop, no problem. We do have some links where you can purchase your own. There'll be affiliate links, so we do get a small percentage, and by doing that, you'll support our site. So thank you for that. And speaking of support, I want to thank Beacon Press for hooking us up with the review copy, and of course, thank you all for watching. If you are into graphic novels, comics, check us out every day at graphicpolicy.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, Instagram, TikTok, Mastodon, Threads, Blue Sky, all Graphic Policy, keeping it nice and consistent. Until next time, keep reading those comics, and keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.